prerequisite because you are actually going to understand step by step from the scratch. So whether you are a general DevOps or maybe you are a AWS DevOps or maybe the other DevOps which you already learned, that is also fine. You will get an idea that how you really can transform your DevOps knowledge also implementing in Azure DevOps. That's something that what you can learn from this Azure workshop. But anyways, let us not waste our time and let's start with today's agenda. You can see that this is something that what I told you. I mean, we are basically going to discuss CI/CD implementation in the Azure DevOps. It does not mean that it only applies to Azure DevOps. You can also implement the same continuous integration and delivery in any one of the tools which you learned or which you may be working already. Okay. So our agenda is basically to go with the prerequisites. So I basically guess maybe few of you may not be from the DevOps background or maybe from the other backgrounds which you really want to get into DevOps. That's the reason why I basically have given this CI/CD prerequisites. That is where we basically discuss the basic understanding of what exactly the CI/CD and so on. So for that, I'm just opening my whiteboard and then try to start with a step-by-step understanding of the CI/CD and today's implementation agenda. So, all right. As you can see, I mean, this is what we are going to discuss step by step, CI/CD prerequisites. And in the very first step that what we are going to discuss, we are going to discuss how developers really work in the real time. Because many of you guys really get confused when you really started learning this DevOps. You might be a bit, not comfortable when you really want to start working in any project. So this particular whatever the developers work prerequisite, so we are going to cover that how developers really working in the real-time environment. Okay, so for that, you see that I have basically introduced a couple of slides also on down, and we are going to discuss all of them. Okay, so please bear with me. And for that, I prepared here. So you see that whenever you start really working in a project, okay, and how your team really looks like, that's something that you really need to understand. So when I say how developers work, but you should know that how really team looks like in real time. Okay, so here you are looking at the roles which I have already listed here, and you see that there are something called multiple roles available. Okay, developer 1, developer 2, developer 3, developer 4, and also developer 5. So developer 5 can be also called as a DevOps engineer. It means whenever you are working in a project as a DevOps engineer, it does not mean that you only basically you are called as DevOps engineer. You are also one of the developers. That you keep in your mind. You are also one of the developers because you are implementing continuous integration and delivery, which is also part of the development. Okay. All right. So then you also have one more role called Scrum Master. Okay, so we will discuss that in a bit, but this is something that what you really have different roles in your project. Whenever you really start working in a project where they follow some agile methodology, and these are the different roles really available in your project. Okay, so now let us quickly understand what exactly this product owner will do and what exactly the Scrum Master will do, and rest of the developers, of course, we already know, but we discuss maybe 2 or 3 minutes regarding this. Okay, so now if you can look at here, if you can look at here, So if you can look at here, and you have something called a product owner. And what exactly the product owner is all about. And whenever you look at this particular product owner, so the product owner always talks to the customer. So what exactly it means? So the one who really wants to have the software to be implemented, okay? For example, this particular customer wants to start a banking business, okay? For that, he needs a banking application. So that is the reason why all these developers are actually working on implementing a banking application. So then what is the role of this product owner? Product owner will be getting all the needs actually from the customer, that who really wants the business. Okay, the one who really wants the application or the software. Okay. And then a product owner is always the responsible guy to get all the requirements from the customer. And then the same thing will be conveyed to the developers also, who really implementing the application. In simple words, product owner will be responsible for getting all the kind of requirements from the customer who really wants to have his application to be implemented. That is the first thing that which always happens between a product owner and a customer. Okay. And then a scrum master is basically one of the roles which he will guide, how the developers and everybody should go with the development process. Okay. So when we are following agile methodology, I'm not really going to discuss what is agile and so on. It will be boring for you. But when we are following this agile methodology, a scrum master will guide how the development should be implemented. He will guide how the development should be implemented to everybody who is basically part of the team. Okay. So it means whenever I say that product owner and scrum master and different developers, including the DevOps engineer, it does not mean that they are separate. They are actually a team together. Okay, a team together. So this is something that the product owner always basically gets the requirements from the customer, and then he will be passing the requirement details to the developers, and the developers will really be working implementing any kind of application. Okay, so that is something. These are the different roles really available in the real project. Okay. And also one more point that I would like to say, that a software cannot be implemented at one stretch. What does it mean? For example, if you take a banking application, for example, let me take ICICI Bank. Okay. When I take ICICI Bank, and ICICI Bank can have really lots of features available. Okay. But if you want to implement this particular software, that software implementation might take, let's say, 3 years of time. Okay, 3 years of time. So it means that you really cannot implement the whole software at one stretch and make wait the customer for 3 years. So if the customer has to wait for 3 years, it would be really difficult. So that is the reason why what is really going to happen. So this software implementation will happen step by step. What does it mean by the step by step? It will be implemented in different kind of iterations. So 2 features implemented at once. Okay. And again 2 features implemented one more time, and 2 features will be implemented one more time, and so on. It means for every iteration, they keep on implementing many features, step by step. So until the whole software implementation is complete. Okay. So this is basically the simple point. What I would like to convey is the software will not be implemented. The whole software will not be implemented at once. It will be implemented step by step, taking feature by feature and implementing and giving it to the customer. But we will talk about that. We will talk about that in clear detail. So now this is something that what exactly it means. Okay. And these are basically, this is something that the answer for the first one. So you have different kind of roles available whenever you really want to start with any project, including a product owner, scrum master, and the developers. And when you are called as DevOps engineer, it does not mean that you are a designated only DevOps engineer. You're also one of the developer. Okay. And this is something how the project developers role looks like and how the really implementation can really go on. Okay, so this is something that what is really that how developers really work. And also the most important thing that I would like to say, whenever I say that, whenever I basically say that how developers really work, the developers really work looking at keeping their code somewhere in one of the repository. Okay, so anyways, we will discuss that in a bit, but let's say that, for example, this particular team, okay, they are working in a .NET programming language. So .NET framework, they are implementing the application in the .NET. Whenever they really want to start implementing in the .NET, they have to keep the code somewhere in the remote repository in a storage location. Okay, so whenever all these developers are actually started working on implementing any project, they really have to start keeping the code somewhere in the storage location, which is actually called repository. In our case, in the Azure DevOps, Azure Repos is basically called a storage location, a remote repository location where developers can keep the code. Okay, so it means that whenever you look at the developers, while developers are actually implementing any code, they really keep their code in this particular Azure Repos. Azure Repos is one of the remote repository location where they actually keep the code so that they really start implementing or maybe releasing the code. Okay, that's something that what is the first thing. And Azure Repos is basically a remote repository location where you keep your code, whatever the code is being implemented by the developers. Okay, this is basically kind of information. So I'm not really going into Git and these details, but as an overview, you see that this is something how it happens. The developers keep on implementing the code and they keep their code in the Azure Repos. Azure Repos is one of the remote repository location where it is basically where the code is really kept. Okay, so this is something that what exactly this Azure Repo. Azure Repos is basically provided by the Microsoft under this Azure DevOps. Okay, so this is something that what exactly this Azure Repos, and then this is how really the developers really work with the Azure Repos in terms of the Azure DevOps. Okay, and that's something what is that really. And then let me just go to the next step. So because I'm going by step, I really can't go in detail with Git and all these things, but I try to explain you the overview so that you will understand the steps what we are actually going to learn. So then the next step, that what is a build process, which is very, very important. I mean, when you really look at this developers work, I told you, I mean, whenever developers start working on code implementation, they keep their code in one of the remote repository called Azure Repos. So Azure Repos is basically provided by the Azure DevOps. Okay, but what exactly the build process? Why do I need to understand the build process to really implement this CI/CD? That is most important point that you need to understand in today's topic. So then let me just go explain that build process. So if you can look at any kind of project. For example, let me take Java, let me take .NET, okay? Let me take maybe Python, or you take any kind of a programming language that you really work, okay? So you see that whenever you write the code, for example, you are the developer and you are implementing your code in Java, .NET or Python. Okay. So whenever you write the code in Java programming language. Java programming language. So it means that whenever you write the code, this programming language can be understood by humans. This can be understood by humans. So whatever you write, even in .NET, even in Python, whatever the code that you write, that programming language, whatever you write, that can be understood by the humans. But let us say that, whenever you have a system, okay, whenever you have a system, then you have written a Java code, but the Java code can be understood by the humans only. But how your system can understand, that programming language, whatever you have written? So how you can understand, because how the system can understand this Java code should be converted into mission understandable language. So this is something called, a compiling and generating the binary code. So always, whatever you write the code, and that code can be understood by the humans. But if the system should be understood, then what should happen? This code should be converted into the binary code so that the system can be understood, can understand this binary code. So this is basically process of compiling the code and generate binary code. Okay, so this is basically what it happens in the background. Whatever the programming language that you choose and write, so each programming language only can be understood by the humans. But if the systems has to understand your language or the code, that code has to be converted into the binary code. So for that, what you need to do, you need to basically compile and generate the binary code. Okay, so in simple words, this is something called build process. So whatever we are basically doing here, the compilation and generate binary, this is basically called build process. You understand? So you will write the code and your code will be compiled and converted into the binary code by doing a build process. Whether you write a Java, .NET or Python, whatever the code that you really consider, this has to be, every code has to go through the build process. Being a DevOps engineer, your main role is to also build the code, whatever the code it could be, Java, Python or .NET or whatever the code that you take. Okay, so that is the reason why it is very, very important to understand that the build process. Okay, so now the point is, when I say the build process, I said you will be doing it. Who will be doing it? Developers basically will do. Okay, developers knows how they have to build their code, and also you should know being a DevOps engineer. Okay, you should know being a DevOps engineer. So it means that you should be good at this build process, guys. Believe me, I mean, if you don't know the build process, it is very difficult for your life, being a DevOps engineer in any project. Okay, now the reason that why I was really explaining this, because whatever the CI/CD that we are actually going to implement, that includes this build process. If you don't understand this build process, then you really can't implement or understand the CI/CD at all. Okay, so that is the reason why you really need to understand this build process. Then only you can go with the next step, implementing this continuous integration and delivery and deployment process. All right, so now let me just quickly basically go how you really build, or maybe you build any Java project or not yet. Okay, so now let me just basically take two programming languages in here. Okay, Java and .NET. So whenever you really write any Java code, you have lots of Java files. For example, now let me just go in here. So I go in here and I would try to, so simple Java program. Okay, so I'm taking a simple Java program and let me just go in here and then see that this is something that what I was saying. So you have a simple Java program that you do not need to understand what is the Java program is all about. It is simply, printing a string, hello Java. But you come down here, whenever you really see that, you need to compile it, as I told you, right? So whenever you take any programming language, when you write the code, that has to be compiled. Then in order to generate that code, in order to execute that code, so after the compilation, that code will be converted into the binary code, then that code will be executed by the system. It is simple. It is as simple as that, guys. So as I told you, what you have, you have a code, and then once you have the code, you need to compile that code. Once the code is compiled, then that code, whatever is compiled, can be executed by the system. By the system, then you will be getting the output. Right? So now the problem is, I think this is something that how you have to understand. So you see that here what we have, we only have simply that a simple Java programming language. So a simple Java code. So there is only one file. There is only one Java file here, and you can simply compile it and then you can simply execute it. It makes sense, right? When you have only one file or two files or three files, you can really compile them and execute them. It is all fine. But let us assume that, basically assume that when you really see the real-time project, okay? So let's say that you have Java, okay? What you are implementing a banking application. You are implementing what? Banking application. When the developers are actually implementing banking application, it is very difficult. I mean, there would be, let's say, 200 or 300 files of code which is basically written by the developers. Okay, but can you really compile each and every file and then execute them? Is it really don't you think it is really complicated process? So if you have to execute, if you have to compile and then execute it, it is very difficult being a developer. Okay, now that is basically a problem whenever we look at the compilation of any code. Okay, so you cannot really compile each and every file and generate a binary and then execute it. So let us assume that in order to overcome this problem, if you have some tools outside, okay, if you have some tools outside, which will do it for us. Okay, which will compile and execute our binary. Okay, and now we will understand what is the binary, but let us understand, if you have few tools which can compile and execute your code, then that will be easier for you. That will be easier for you. Then that is the reason why what we have, you really have few tools available in the market. You really have few tools available in the market. Since I'm talking about Maven, you basically have something called Maven. You have, since we are talking about Java, you have a tool called Maven. You also have a tool called Ant. You also have a tool called Gradle. So it means that these tools will help you to compile the code and execute whatever the code that you really want to do it. So it means by having these tools, your life easier. It means your life easier to compile your code and generate the binary files which can be understood by the system. Okay, so this is something called with respect to Java, right? So this is something what we had discussed. And when I say basically Java, and don't I have even for the .NET? Yes, of course we have even it for the .NET. So when I basically go here, okay, and .NET also, as I said, I mean, you are implementing this banking app now in the .NET. So even this .NET code also, what you have to do, you have to compile, right? So let's say in this case, we have almost like 1,000 files, the code files. These are all .NET code files. There are around 1,000 files. Can you go and compile them? Can you go and compile them, each file, and then execute them? No, not really. In practical, so that is really very difficult for you to really do it. Okay, but if you have few tools, few tools, they can do it for you. That will be easier for you, right? The same way, .NET also has their own .NET, build tools which can do it for you. So it means the .NET tools are basically available out there, which will basically compile the code and then generate the binary files or the execute the code files. Okay, so now this is something that how it happens, whether you take Java, whether you take .NET, whether you take C or C++, and whatever you take it. For every code, the code which is basically written by the developers, that code should be compiled and being generated as a binary code to be understood by the system to execute your code. Okay, so now the point is why I'm really talking about this. Okay, so because of the reason that you see, you basically see here. Now you basically see that whatever the compile plus execute code or whatever, so this is basically called build process. So now the build process can be taken care by if it is Java, for example, the Maven tool can take care of the build process. If it is a .NET basically tool can take care of the build process. If it is a C++, it can take CMake is one of the tool can take care of the build process, and so on. Okay, so now the point is who will build it? Right? So as I said, developers can be responsible while building their code, while they are implementing it. For example, developers are actually developing some code and they want to really execute their code, then they have to build it. At the same time, the DevOps engineer should know how to build the code which is really implemented by the developers. So it means the most important thing, whenever you join a project, you will be interacting with the developers, how they are writing the code and what they are writing the code, how they are doing the build process. And according to that, you will also be start doing that build process automation using this Maven or this tool and the CMake. So it means you will understand the build process or the way that the developers are actually doing, and you will basically start implementing or automating that build process using a couple of tools available in the market. This is something called a build process. Now the point is, whenever you look at this particular build process, so when I say the build process, so this build process, what is an outcome of a build process? It means that whenever you compile a code and generate the binary code, what exactly the outcome of the build process? The build process outcome is a binary file. What is that? A binary file. In simply, we call it as binary. Okay, the outcome of any build process in the software development life cycle. So the outcome of the build process is a binary file, and in the DevOps terminology, we always call it as a binary, or you also can call it as artifact. Okay, and these are pretty much important for you to implement CI/CD. Okay, so now the binary, whenever I say the binary, it is an outcome of the build process. Just understand that. Simple. In simple words, whenever I call it as binary is an outcome of any build process, any language, any code build process. I can also call sometimes as an artifact. So this is something that you need to understand. You cannot really skip understanding this build process. Being a DevOps engineer, whether you are a AWS DevOps or not, general DevOps or Azure DevOps or whatever the DevOps that you are, you have to know this build process thoroughly. Otherwise, you really can't be comfortable in implementing the continuous integration and continuous delivery. Okay, and now what is the outcome of any build process of the code? The outcome is a binary file, a binary, or it can also be called as artifact. All right. So this is something that what I was actually trying to convey you. But sometimes you might be confused that what exactly the binary, right? So let me just explain you maybe with a good example. Okay. So let me just download maybe any yeah, Terraform, not Terraform, maybe Terra Copy. Okay, so see guys, this is one of the software, okay, so which you can download. This software is basically a Terra Copy. It means it basically copies the files faster. That's it. You generally copy the files from one folder to other folder, but this particular application, this particular software, you can use this software to copy your files faster. But why I'm really talking about this particular Terra Copy, I will tell you. So let me just go and try to download it, guys. Okay, so I'm trying to download it, and when I try to download it, let me just ask you. So I'm downloading it. I guess it's complete. All right. So here you can see that this particular file has been downloaded. Okay. So let me just take the properties. Let me take the properties. So what is this, guys, here? So this is an exe file. This is an exe file. Why I am really showing you this? This is one of the executable file, which is also called as a binary file. This is also software is implemented by some developers. So this software binary is in terms of the .exe extension. So it means whenever you download the binaries from the outside, you will have some extension. For this, you have something called .exe. You have something called .exe. The same way, whenever you implement any kind of application, whether it is a Java or .NET, okay, or Python, whatever you call it as, so whenever you do the build process, you will have a binary file generated. You will have the binary file generated. That binary file can be exe file or jar file or war file or zip file or anything. So that is what I would like to convey you. So it means a binary file can be anything, because whatever you have seen here, you have exe file that you will download it and you will use it, right? You will download it and you will start using that software. The same way, whenever you basically write any software, if it is a web application, so the outcome of the binary file can be in the war file. So even, if you are basically implementing a Java application, the extension of that application can be a jar file. And if you implement a .NET, and that extension can be zip file or DLL. Okay, so it means these are different extensions of the binary file. It is not necessarily always it should be in the exe. They can be in many formats. That is what I would like to convey you. Okay, so just know these are the binary files which you have many kind of formats in the outside. Okay, let us stop this particular topic here. So I hope you understand the build process is basically a process of compiling your code and generating your binary. You will come to know that why I was really discussing this in a bit, but let us just go in further details. All right. So I just remove it. Why? Okay. All right. Now you basically come down to the next steps which we have. So here you really can see that we understood this build process, and also we understood how developers really work. Now let us go into today's topic, understanding CI/CD pipelines. But before that, I try to give you this Azure pipelines, that how they really look like. Okay, it is pretty much simple. I mean, I try to make it a really very much simple process for you. Just a moment. Okay. So, all right. So now you see that Azure pipelines that we have to understand. You see that whenever I talk about Azure pipelines, whenever I talk about these Azure pipelines, what exactly this Azure Pipelines is all about. So you take Jenkins as a tool to implement continuous integration and delivery. You take AWS, okay, DevOps in order to implement your continuous integration and delivery. You take Azure DevOps, as basically to implement your continuous integration and delivery. Now, in each tool, even there are many, in outside market. So you can have GitLab, you can have, something called GitHub Action. There are many tools basically available in outside. So in each tool, whenever you want to implement your CI/CD, you will have different kind of, syntaxes that you really write and implement your CI/CD pipelines. Okay, the same way, even in the Azure DevOps, you really have very much simplified, syntaxes to write your Azure pipelines in order to implement your CI/CD pipelines. Okay, so I will give you a simple tip to make you understand. You do not need to be, learning everything, but in simple terms, you actually can learn how the Azure pipelines really look like. So let us compare with a simple script. Okay, for example, you have a script. Whenever you really want to write a script, what is the script will do? For example, this script first step, okay, this script first line, it will connect to database, and then fetch the data, and then store the data. Okay, so connect to database, fetch the data, store the data. What does it mean? This script will work in 3 steps. All right, this script will work in 3 steps. What the script will do? It will connect to the database, and it will fetch the data, and it will store the data in the storage location. In these 3 steps, it is actually doing whatever the script has to do it. Right? The same thing. You also have something similar when it comes to Azure pipelines. Okay, so it means whatever the build process. So let me just say, okay, build process, whatever the build process that you call it as, this basically contains, let's say, couple of steps. So those steps are actually call it as tasks in the Azure pipelines. Whatever the steps that I just talked in one of the script, those steps are basically called as tasks. And these tasks are actually being implemented in the Azure pipelines. That's it. We are not doing anything more. These are the tasks are basically being there in the Azure pipelines. You will use those tasks in order to implement your CI/CD process. So, all right, now this tasks that we are actually going to see in a bit, okay, and we are basically driving towards our continuous integration now. Okay, so Azure Pipelines contains what? Azure Pipelines contains only tasks. So you need to implement those tasks in order to implement your continuous integration and delivery. That's it. So now let me just try to make you understand what exactly this continuous integration, okay, in terms of the Azure pipelines or whatever it is. So it will be applicable to every DevOps guy not only limited to the Azure DevOps. Now let us try to understand this continuous integration. Okay. So the main thing, every time we have a couple of steps to be done by the developer. What is that? So here we have developer. Okay, so developers, and whenever they write the code, they write the code, and they write the code, and then in the next step, what they do, they really compile the code, and once they compile the code, they basically execute the code. All right, and then once they execute the code, and as a part of this compilation, they will get the binary. Right? So till now, this is everything what we really have. This is all implemented manually by the developers. But now you are a DevOps guy. You are a DevOps engineer, right? Now what you do? You are basically implementing CI, right? What you are actually going to do? You are also basically, you're not writing the code, but you are taking the code. What you are doing, guys? You are taking the code, and then you are compiling the code. And then you are generating the binary. Okay, and this is you are making automation. This you are making as an automation using some build tools. So build tools can be Maven, .NET, or CMake, or anything, right? So this is something called the automation that you are doing is something called CIA, continuous integration. So if the developers have to really, compile the code, execute the code, and binary generation and everything, they are doing it manually. But you are doing that with an automation tool, we're using a build tool, and that is something called continuous integration. Now, let us basically take a use case to understand this particular continuous integration in a clear detail. So now let's say you are the, let's say, developer, and as I said, you have something called Azure repo. This is basically where the developers keep the code. All right, and then developer basically puts his code. So he will write the code, whatever the language it can be Java, .NET, or whatever. Okay, and then they will basically push the code into this particular remote repository. Then there is an automation. Gets triggered, and that will basically build the code and generate binary. So who is basically doing this process? This is being done by the DevOps guy. So this is done by the DevOps guy. So it means sometimes developers also might know how to implement, how to use the existing tools. But how do you really do that? And you, being a DevOps engineer, you know better than how developers are actually doing it. Okay, so that's the reason that you are doing an automation process in order to really implement this. this is something called continuous integration. So it means whenever developer really writes the code and push the code into the remote repository called Azure Repo, that automation script automatically will be executed, and the build process will take place, and it will generate the binary. So what is the benefit of implementing CA continuous integration now? It is a benefit because they do not need to do it manually. The automation scripts will take place. The automatic will take care of the build process and generate the binary, and simply the developer will take this binary and execute the code whether it is working or not. This is something that how they really implement the continuous integration, which is also called automation of the build process. Okay, so now this is one of the use cases where this continuous integration is really become famous. Now let me just jump into our Azure pipelines. Okay, so now I'm basically going to show you the Azure pipelines, which I already have made it for you guys. So all right. So you do not need to worry everything what is in there, but I try to really explain you that what this particular continuous integration pipeline really contains. In simple words, so let me just go and then all right. So very first thing, when I say continuous integration is a build process, which will take place automatically, which is also called automation of the build process by using some CI/CD tools. In our case, we are using Azure Pipelines as a CI/CD. Okay, so for that, what you need to know, okay, the basic understanding what you really need to know, because every CI/CD pipeline in the Azure Pipelines can be implemented using .yaml file. So the CI/CD pipeline can be implemented in the YAML syntax. So you see that you have something called Azure Pipelines -1.yaml. So this is a file how you really write in the YAML coding. Okay, and let me just come down a bit. Okay, when I basically come down a bit, you see that this is basically a build process, that how really the Azure pipeline basically looks like. But let me just quickly really explain how that really looks like. So as I told you, Azure pipelines are nothing but couple of tasks. That is what I told you. Azure pipelines are nothing but couple of tasks. So you see guys, steps, okay, and you have couple of tasks here. So you see here, task, and then you come down, task. So everywhere you really find out the task that what I was really talking about. Okay, now let me just try to really show you that what I really did it in my particular pipeline. Okay, so you see that there is something called one task in the beginning, the very first task. So you need to understand as a script that I explained you previously. So whenever you write a script, you have a couple of tasks. So what was that? You will connect to the database, and then you will fetch the data, and you will store the data. And these are the different steps that you execute in any script that you write. The same way, whenever you are writing Azure pipeline for continuous integration, you will write in tasks. So how do you write? And these tasks are automatically given by the Azure DevOps. You do not need to worry about it. You can simply use the existing tasks which are actually given by the Azure DevOps itself. All right. Now you see that what you really have it here. In this particular in this particular in this particular project, what we have .NET banking project. Okay, we have a .NET banking project. So when you want to execute a .NET project, I said what you need to do, you need to use the build tool for the .NET to build, right? So for that, whenever you really want to build your .NET project, you need to have the .NET, .NET tool to be installed. That is actually called Software Development Kit. So whenever you need to build any .NET project, you need to have that particular .NET tool to be installed, which is actually called Software Development Kit. So in this case, simply you can use this particular task, which is already available in the Azure DevOps. The best thing is that with the Azure Pipelines, you really do not need to worry about installing and everything. You can simply use the existing tool, and then you can really use it in your tasks. So what I'm just doing, so I'm basically installing a SDK, use .NET task in order to build my project. So you see, what is the version of the .NET that I'm installing? It is simply 6.x. It means .NET 6 I am installing in order to build my project. Okay, I will also show you where you can see the documentation. You will understand it. Okay, so first step, what I have to do, guys, I have to basically install the .NET SDK. This is the first step. And the next step, so I said, whenever you really want to start building any project, whether it could be Java, whether it could be .NET, whether it could be anything, what you need to do, you need to build the code. Okay, building code means download required libraries plus and build the code. What does it mean? When I say build the code, it means that you will basically download the required libraries and you basically have to build the code. Okay, so that is something in the next step, what is actually being done in the second step here. You see that this is a step, that this is the command in the .NET that you will be building these particular files. So whenever you see a CS project file, this is a .NET project file where you have to build. Okay, so this particular task will basically build the code. It means it will download the required libraries and then it will actually build your code. Okay, so that is something called, first step is this, and install the required .NET tool, and the next step is build the code. Okay, and build the code. And this step, so this step also, you see that whenever you want download the libraries, you see that this is something a task can be used restore and select. So whenever you say restore, and it will download all the required libraries from the project file. Okay, and the third step, you see that this is something, a command called to build your CS project file. So build. Okay, first step, install required tool, and then next step, download the binary, download the libraries, and third step, build the code. That's it. Okay, and come down. When you come down here, you simply have it .NET test. So this is a task which you can use it running the unit test. So this is the fourth step, basically called unit test. But I will explain you this unit test later. But for now, you can also ignore it, or you can also understand if you guys already know it. Okay, so this is something that what we are basically doing as a fourth step here. And then once you are basically done with this, what you are going to do, you are preparing a report. You are preparing a report from this unit test. So we will understand these two steps in detail in a bit. Okay, so what is the unit test? Why we are doing a report? And this is something called a task, publish code coverage results. So this is something what I really have used. And also, if I basically come down to the next step, so next step, you see that I am basically publishing the binary. I am actually publishing the binary. This is something what the build steps that I have in my project. Guys, you understand this something, it is simple, it is quite simple as that. So you see a script contain couple of steps, the same way a build process can contain couple of steps. So these are the steps that are actually available in the .NET project. But you might be surprised that how do I know that I have to use these tasks, right? It makes sense, right? That is the question that you need to ask. So how do I know that I have to use these tasks, and how do I, from where do I get it? Simply, you go here, you go to Microsoft documentation. You see that whatever I had really explained, everything you have in the Microsoft documentation. Okay, so you can see that it explains everything. What does it mean? You really, when you are using Azure Pipelines, you do not need to worry about all these things. These syntaxes and these tasks all basically available for you. You simply have to copy and make use, adjust according to your project and make use them. That's it. So what I did here, you see that I basically did an installation. Okay, I basically did an installation here. I basically did an installation, whatever is basically given here, and come down. So once the installation is done, so you see that there's something called a step which is given. So restore, do this before your build task. It is simply given. I mean, it is pretty much given in here. So it means that you can simply use these tasks in order to build your project and simply make use it. Okay, so now come down. If you come down, and you also have the next step that what you need to do. So you see that here you have something to use a build. Okay, so this is something that how you really can make use it, from where you can use it. So you come down, and then again you really can see that there are something called test and something called publishing reports. But I will talk about that in a bit. So which is very, very important for you to understand. See, whenever you really write any code, okay, for example, you write a code, a plus b sum a plus b, okay, c is equal to a plus b, and then print C. For example, this is the code. What it will do, it will basically simply write the code and it will add the values and it will be assigned to C, and then it will print it, right? So who will write this code, guys? This code is written by the developer. This code written by the developer. But there is something called also unit test. There's something called unit test. So this is a unit test. It means that they also write some code to test whatever the code which is written here. That is something called unit test. Okay, so I'm not really going into detail regarding this unit test, but this is something, what is the unit test and all these things. But for now, let me just go and execute our pipelines here. You see here, these are the steps basically available for you. Okay, and now you see that our main intention of this particular CI, our main intention of this particular CI, whenever developer pushes code into developer branch, okay, this continuous CI process will be triggered. Okay, so this is a code. You can see that I'm actually going to execute that code in a bit. All right. So how do I do that? So let me just do one thing. I mean, I go and explain our. So here, you see that this is our .NET project. Okay, this is a .NET project. You see that this is a .NET project where we have, and then we are basically going to write the pipelines. Where do you write the pipelines? You go in here in the pipeline section. You see that this is a continuous integration build. So you can go here, whatever I have actually showed you. This is basically what I have it here. What can happen whenever the code is basically pushed into this particular branches, starting with the dev, and this particular build process will really be executed. So what is this build process will do? This build process will build the project and then push that binary into the pipeline. Okay, so now let me just go and do it. I mean, this is something called a pipeline, which I already have, and it is pretty much straightforward. It is not really complicated to build it. So what you can do, you can simply come down and then build it. So how you can really do that? You go to the new pipeline, okay, and then go to the Azure repo. But for now, I'm skipping this because I already have this continuous integration build pipeline in place. So let me just go and trigger this continuous integration pipeline. So whenever there are changes, what can happen? So this particular pipeline to be triggered, and then the build process will take place. So all right. So now I'm just adding some commits, guys. So these are the steps for the build process of .NET project. Okay, so all right, I'm basically pushing this code, added comment, and then go in here, I'm committing it, and then I'm really pushing my code into the remote repository, which I have it here. So which I have it here. Now, when you look at here, once that code is really pushed, and you see that automatically the build is really triggered. This is something called continuous integration build process, as long as this Azure Pipelines is really concerned. What you really have, whatever the code which I have it here, this is a build process for the .NET project. Okay, and these are all steps will be executed step by step. You see that now all the steps will be executed. When you really open this and then open this, you see that it is really executing everything, and then you really can generate the binary out of it. This is an automated process being a DevOps engineer. Okay, so this is we can just wait till the completion of this particular build process, and then we can take a break for 5 or 10 minutes, or maybe we can take it. Maybe we can take a break now. Now it is, what is the time now, guys? So I will come back in 10 minutes, or is that okay? 10 minutes is okay. So I will come back in 10 minutes and then we will start it again. So meanwhile, this build process will take place, and after the break, we will be implementing, we will be looking at the continuous integration and delivery process. So Nihal, that is an example that I was actually trying to give you for the script. So we are not really connecting to database, but I was trying to give you an example how the script can be implemented. For example, a script has to connect the database and fetch the data and so on. How do you write the script? You write the script in a couple of steps. That is only an example. Okay. So how you have linked your VS with Azure? Yeah. So I will talk about that. Yeah. I will talk about that, and we will take a break for 10 minutes, and then we will come back and we can see that how we really have implemented this continuous integration, and also we will start implementing the continuous integration and delivery process. Okay. Yeah. So let's come back after 10 minutes, guys. See you again. Okay. Hi guys, I hope all of you are back. So can I start or should I wait? Okay, all right. Okay, so I mean, till now, what we really discussed, we had discussed the build process, which is also called continuous integration. Now, there was a question that I've actually got, that how I really linked my current code from my local laptop to the Azure pipelines. It is pretty much straightforward. So I only created the repository. Okay, I have my repository here, and then I basically have configured my pipeline to really trigger by using this particular syntax. This is also an automated task, automated syntax, which is given by the Azure DevOps. It means, what does it mean? Whenever you trigger, whenever you basically push any changes, okay, with this particular branch starting with dev, it will automatically be triggered. This is only the integration between your push and the Azure pipelines. Azure pipelines, Azure DevOps will automatically understand whenever you have something in your pipeline, such as triggering, it will understand the trigger and it will basically trigger your pipeline automatically. And also, you see that there is something called a pool and VM image. What does it mean? It means that where your build process should be built, where your continuous integration pipeline should be executed. So that is a Linux VM called Ubuntu latest. In order to define that, you will use pool and a VM image. Okay, something called Ubuntu latest. That's it. So simply by using a trigger, you are telling Azure DevOps to automatically trigger the continuous integration pipeline and start build process. And by using this pool and VM image, it will basically be executing or building your project using this particular Ubuntu, Linux VM build process. Okay, so now this is something with respect to the continuous integration, guys. This is respect to continuous integration. Then let us basically talk about continuous delivery and continuous deployment. That is something that what we really want to do it in our what you call in our demo. So here you see that we basically have understand this continuous integration. A continuous integration is a process of automatically triggering your build process for your project, whether it is Java, .NET, or whatever. You get all the predefined tasks given by the Microsoft, and you can put all of them in the Azure pipeline as tasks, and then you will basically execute your build process based on the triggers. Okay. Now let us basically try to understand the continuous delivery and deployment. So for that, I actually prepared a couple of things here. So here you look at this particular diagram, okay, and you are the developer. Okay, so you are the developer and you are the developer and you are basically pushing the code into the Azure repos. Okay, and you are basically pushing the Azure repos, your code, and then as soon as you push your code based on the trigger, this pipeline basically gets triggered from these Azure pipelines. So as I've shown you, I mean, whenever you basically give the trigger in your pipeline, it will be automatically triggered and your build process will continue. So till now, this is something called a continuous integration only. But now let us go ahead with a bit further understanding this continuous delivery and deployment. So now let me just go and make you really understand this process. Till now, let's say that you, as a part of this continuous integration, what you will generate? You will generate the binary, right? So did we see the binary till now? We did not see the binary, right? Now, let me just go and check that binary, whether it is generated or not. Okay. Where do we have it? You go to the pipelines and you go to the pipelines. You see that this is the pipeline, the continuous integration build trigger. You click on that. And once you click on that, you go to the stages and you see that there is something called published. There is something called published. If you click on this particular published and you see that this is something called the binary, which is basically prepared as a part of the build process. As I told you, for the build binary can be in many formats. Okay, it can be a zip file, it can be .dll file, it can be exe file, anything. In our case, the zip files have been generated as a binary, as a continuous integration build process. Now, let me just ask you one thing. Okay, so I would like to ask you one thing. So, as I said, you have something called a binary generated. Before what I said, you have an exe file and where you basically download into your system. So I showed you a Terra Copy and you will download into system and you will install it and then you will basically use it, right? You will basically use it. The same way, you have this binary, okay, which is a .NET project, which is basically a project for the banking web application. Okay. Now, this particular binary, where do you really deploy? Deploy is basically nothing but you are basically installing your binary into one of the systems. Okay. So now let me just go and make you a bit more understanding this. So as I said, you will install the exe file and you will really install, you will start using it. The same way, in order to basically install or deploy this particular binary file, what you need to do, you need to have something called a web server, because this is a web application, in fact. Okay, so this is a web application. It requires a system called a web server. So how many web server softwares which we have? We have something called Tomcat. We have something called WebLogic. You have something called Nginx. Okay. You have something called IAS. So these are the different web server softwares available. Okay. So now what does it mean? So it means in order to deploy or install your binary, what you need to do, you need to have a system. Okay, you need to have a system. What do you mean by the system? You need to have, let's say, 8 GB of RAM. And let's say you need to have a 2 CPU. And you need to have a storage of TB, 1 TB, for example. And it means you also have to install one of the softwares in it, whether it is a Tomcat or maybe IAS or whatever you install, right? So it means this becomes your web server. Okay, so a system with a few configurations, RAM and CPU and TB storage, and you will install the web server software, then this system will become basically web server. And then you will be installing your binary into this particular web server. Then your software, your web application will be running. your web application will be running. So I hope you understand. When you have exe file, what you did, you try to download it. You try to download it and then you try to install it. You try to install it. So the same way, when you have a binary, if you want to install, if that is a web application binary, you need to have the system. You need to have the system where you have installed web server software. Web server software. So this is basically what you can call. This is something called an infrastructure, right? This is an infrastructure. So you need an infrastructure to deploy or to install your binary into the system so that the users will be connecting to this particular, web application and they will be accessing it. Okay. So this is something called an infrastructure. But now in our continuous delivery deployment, we are basically using Azure Cloud Web App Service. Okay, so what does it mean? It means that you basically have to install you have to basically take the system with 8 GB of RAM, or maybe, you need to have 1 TB of storage and so on. You need to install the web server and so on. But this is one of the services available in the Azure cloud. So this basically will give you everything what you need in order to install your binary. Okay, so this is a service, this is a web app service which will basically give you the infrastructure or the platform to basically deploy or install your binary. Okay, so now how do you do that? Being a DevOps engineer, you should not really do the installation manually. What you need to do, you also have to do it service creation automatically. Okay, so now when you come down to our picture here, you see that you have something called Azure Cloud and you have something called a web app. Okay, you see that this web app is basically there in the Azure portal. So it means that whenever you want to deploy your what do you call your binary, you need to have this service to be deployed. You need to have this service so that you can deploy your binary into this particular web app service. Okay, so now let me just explain you the whole thing, how that whole process really will go. Okay, so now what you do, you basically, he tries to push the code in the first step. He tries to push the code, and then based on the trigger, this pipeline will be triggered. This pipeline is basically a continuous integration, for example, and then this pipeline basically build the binary. Okay, and then once this is basically build the binary, then this is basically it has to deploy into the web app which we want to deploy our binary into. Okay, so this is the first step and third step. This is the first step and second step and third step. Then your application, your web application is really running. But what we are doing here, we are basically automating this process also. It means in my pipeline, I also have implemented infrastructure as a code. What is that, guys? Infrastructure as a code. So it means whatever the services that I need, so my pipeline will also deploy my pipeline also basically initiate the service which I need, and then my pipeline will be deploying the binary into the web app server development service. Okay, so now let me just go and show you that code as well. So you see that there is also a simple, there is also a continuous delivery plus continuous deployment. But now, for now, let us basically forget about this. I'm talking about continuous delivery. In general, how it should really happen. So developer, he push the code into Azure repo, and then this particular Azure pipeline, what is that Azure pipeline? Which is called CI/CD. Okay, CI/CD. Now, what this pipeline will do? What this particular pipeline will do? It will basically do the continuous integration. It means it will generate the binary, and also it will initiate the infrastructure. What is the infrastructure in our case? The infrastructure in our case is basically web app. Okay, web app. So now this is the infrastructure automatically, done by the ARM templates. There are some templates called ARM templates in the Azure. So using these ARM templates, you can automate this infrastructure deployment also. So this is something that what we have. But let me just ask you one thing. Why do I need this? Because whenever a developer basically whenever he builds the code, he will get the binary, but he wants to deploy this binary, right, into the web server. So then he can basically check whether the binary is working as expected. So that is the reason why this is called as dev infrastructure web app. So it means whenever the developer pushes the code into the Azure repo, and then the pipeline will be triggered, and that pipeline will build the binary using the CI process, and also it will automatically deploy the infrastructure web app using the ARM templates. And this developer will be accessing this particular web application now and test whether this is basically working fine or not. So this is an automated process of even deploying your infrastructure. All right. So now let me just go a bit further now. So this is something that the developer infrastructure. Now I go to the next step. So you see that there is also one more infrastructure called testing here. Okay. So the testing also contains what, guys? The testing also contains the infrastructure. What is the infrastructure? The same web app. The same web app. So why do I need? So I said this particular development infrastructure is only meant for the developers. So developers will connect to this particular development infrastructure environment and they will test it. But your application should also be tested by the testers. Your application should also be tested by the testers. That is the reason why they also need one more environment called testing environment. So it means this is also an infrastructure as a code. So it means, so this infrastructure as a code also we will deploy it automatically. Then we will give access to the testers so that they test the application whether it is really working as expected or not. Okay, and once this particular application is really working fine, and there is also one more environment called production environment. What? A production environment. A production environment is what? It also has the infrastructure web app. Okay, the same thing what we have here, but this time this will be accessible by the users. What does it mean? For example, let's say this is ICICI Bank. Okay, this is ICICI Bank, and the users will be connecting to this particular web application. They will be accessing the web application and then trying to access it. So this infrastructure also should be built automatically using the ARM templates that we have done already. So now it would be like you can see now, if you can see here, that is something that what I really had explained. So here you see that the process, how it goes. So developer push the code and the pipeline will trigger, and the pipeline will basically trigger the CI pipeline, which will build the binary. And also this pipeline will automatically deploy the infrastructure. It means web app service, which is required for our binary to deploy. We have 3 environments: development, testing, and production. Okay, so once the developer basically tests this particular application, which is deployed in the development, then that will be deployed into the testing environment. And once this is deployed into testing environment, then this is basically given access to the testers. Here there are a couple of testers. These testers are actually testing your application. Once the testers give the positive response, then they will be deployed into the production environment. Then the users will be basically accessing this particular production environment to the customers. Okay, so now let us understand. I mean, whenever the deployment should take place. For example, so we want to deploy our application in the testing environment, but let's say that you want to implement an approval process. So it means you don't want to deploy your application in the testing environment before the developer basically says it is basically working fine, right? So it means the testers should approve the deployment before it basically goes into the testing environment. The same way, so if the testers do not give the proper positive result for the application, then that should not be deployed into the production. So that also should require an approval process. Right? It means if the testing is done in the development by the developers, that will be approved to deploy into the testing environment. Then once that is done, if the positive feedback is given by the testers, that is basically deployed into the production environment. Once that is deployed into the production environment, that is basically accessible by the customers. This is a whole process really that we have implemented in terms of the CI/CD itself. We are not doing anything manually here. So we are doing everything in an automated process. So that is something called continuously. What you are doing continuously, you are delivering your product. You are delivering your application, right? So but here there is one more thing that I actually placed. What is that? For example, let's say the developer one, he basically pushes the code, okay, and then he really the pipeline gets triggered, and the pipeline is basically containing a CI. CI generates what? Binary. CI generates the binary. Let's say you want to save this binary, okay, somewhere, right? You want to save this binary somewhere. Where can you save? There is something called Azure Artifacts in the Azure DevOps. So you can basically store your binary into this Azure DevOps so that, in future, so if somebody wants to take this binary, they can actually come down into this particular Azure Artifacts storage location and they can get the binary from here. Okay, so it means the flow that how I have implemented here, the developer basically pushes the code, and then I basically go and trigger the CI/CD pipeline manually. Okay, I am basically triggering CI/CD pipeline manually. then it will basically generate the binary, okay, as a part of CA, and we will keep this particular binary in here, okay, and also I will deploy the whole infrastructure, testing infrastructure, production infrastructure, development infrastructure, and then I will deploy this binary into development, and then thereafter testing, thereafter into the production. So this is really a real-time, pipeline which you really can find out in our implementation. So now let me just go and explain that. So now let me just go to the pipeline that what I have here. So this is basically how the pipeline really looks like. So now here it is quite simple, guys. What I really did it here. So till here, you already know, I have the CI/CD pipeline, nothing else. There's nothing else. I have till here CI/CD pipeline. Okay. So now you see that this particular task, it will push the binary into Azure artifacts, which I actually have told you before. And then you see, it is basically deploying the infrastructure. What does it mean, infrastructure? I want to deploy web app. I want to deploy what? Web app. So what is the web app? It is a development web app. Okay. And come down. This is basically implemented using ARM template. And this ARM template also contains ARM template also contains the same thing, this task, Azure Resource Manager Template Deployment Task. So this task is also from the Microsoft. You do not need to worry about this task. Okay. So this task is available. I will show you that in a bit. So this task is actually being taken from the Microsoft, and you will use it in order to deploy your web app infrastructure. So for that, what I have used an ARM template called app-service.json. Okay. Now you should be asking me from where I actually can get it here. Okay. So it is pretty much straightforward, guys. What I do, you simply can go to ARM template deployment using Azure DevOps pipelines. You just say that, and you should be getting the Microsoft documentation, and then come down. You really will get this particular. See, this is where I've got. Is it complicated? Not really. So I may not be able to explain each and everything in here, but my intention that I would like to convey you that everything what you need to implement, everything is basically already predefined. There is nothing that you really have to do it with the scripts and everything. Most of the time you get everything already predefined by the Microsoft. You should know how you really have to use it. Okay. So this is basically the task which I've used. So this is a ARM template task which I will basically pass ARM template. And also I showed you here, and from where I've got this app service. So this app service ARM template is basically here. So you see, I placed here, and this is a ARM template which I just placed. This is a JSON ARM template. You see that this is ARM template, but you might be surprised it has lots of code. Not really. You will get this app service also in the Microsoft documentation. So app service ARM template. So you just say this and you get this particular ARM template, and you see create, and you really get everything in here. You see? So this is something, did I implement it myself? So I should know how I should implement. I should implement this infrastructure as a code. Otherwise, you have everything in the Microsoft itself. Okay, so this is something from where I have got it in order to deploy my web app infrastructure, and I simply use that in my pipeline in order to really, deploy my infrastructure. So here I have my infrastructure deployment. So deploy dev infrastructure, and also deploy test infrastructure, and also deploy a prod infrastructure. So everything it has web app will be deployed, and then come down. Once I have the infrastructure ready, I will download the binary. So as I showed you in the diagram, what I actually showed you in here, so once I push the code, and I will deploy, I will trigger CI/CD pipeline manually, and then that will build my binary, and that binary I will store in the Azure artifact, and this Azure artifact will be deployed into the development. But before that, this pipeline will basically deploy this infrastructure, development infrastructure, testing infrastructure, and also production infrastructure, and then it will download the binary and deploy it. And this basically the whole flow how I really have implemented. Okay, so now if I actually show you, this is basically the pipeline which it looks like. So this is a real-time pipeline, guys. So why 5 YAML files used? No, there are no 5 YAMLs. They are basically the other basic files I was teaching to other guys. So that's the reason you can see them. Okay. Right. So you see that when I open this pipeline, this is really that how you really implement in the real projects also. You see the flow. Okay. So you have to understand the flow. That's it. So if you understand the flow, then it will be easy for you to really. So you see in this first, this is a CI pipeline, which will basically build the binary. And then once the binary is built, even in this particular, it builds the binary and stores binary into artifacts. Okay. So as I told you, then in the next step, it will basically deploy the dev infrastructure. It will deploy the test infrastructure. It will deploy the production infrastructure. Okay. Meanwhile, what I will do, I will basically trigger this pipeline. Okay. So I will trigger this pipeline. Meanwhile, so let me just let it go on. But let me just go back and explain that. All right. So here you basically see so I go here and you see that. So this is CI, and I told you, I mean, it will generate the binary and then it pushes into the artifact and it will deploy the infrastructure. Where do we deploy? You deploy in the Azure cloud. Okay, you deploy the test infrastructure and you deploy the production infrastructure. Once this deployment of the infrastructure is done, then your binary will be deployed into the dev environment. And once the dev environment is basically deployed, the developers will access this infrastructure and then they will test it. Once the developers say everything is fine, then this will be approved to deploy into the test environment. And the testers will basically be accessing this testing infrastructure and they will do the testing. And once everything is done, then again, then it is released into the production, then users will be accessing this particular infrastructure. So this is how the real-time continuous integration delivery process really take place. So you guys don't need to worry about when you look at all these, different stages, different tasks, but this is pretty much straightforward when you really understand the flow that how you have to implement. So this is something that how it in reality that how it happens. So let me just go and check how it's running. So you see that still the build is actually going on. Okay, once the build is complete, it will build our binary, which is really required for us. Okay, so now there is also one more thing that you really need to understand. So how Azure DevOps, this is Azure Cloud. Okay, guys, these are two different services. Okay, so when Azure DevOps is deploying the infrastructure in the Azure Cloud, how Azure DevOps is connecting to the Azure clouds? By using a connection called service connection. Okay, so we will create this service connection through which it will basically connect to the Azure cloud and it will deploy the infrastructure and also it will deploy the binary. Okay, so then this is something, the whole thing, how it really works. Let me just go back, and it is still going on. So was the question when UAT happened? So it really depends, Sofyan. So for example, let's say that your project is very big project. So now you have even other testers also who really want to test your application. Then you can also have something called UAT environment. You can also introduce two more UAT environment. There is also an environment called pre-production and production. So it means it really depends on the project that how big it is. So it depends on the project. You will have many environments so that you basically test your application thoroughly. So it basically takes some time to deploy, but yeah, let me just wait. So meanwhile, you guys can ask me questions in the chat, or maybe even you can unmute yourself and you can really start interacting with me. So guys, the only thing, everything, you see that once the build is complete, it started deploying the infrastructure using the ARM templates. Okay, I told you ARM templates, you can get it from the Microsoft. You can get the predefined task to deploy the ARM template as an infrastructure. So now it is deploying the infrastructure. Okay, all right. So now you can ask me questions if you have any. So I know, you really can't understand the whole concept of the tasks and, other stuff that we have. So in one class, in one workshop, it is really difficult to really do that. But you see, I'm trying to give you the whole overview so that you understand what exactly. Can you, wait. Can you please briefly describe different roles in Scrum Master and Agile Coach? I think I I can do that, but that is not the main focus for this workshop. Thus, sorry. So we can see, maybe I can schedule one more workshop for that. Maybe. Do you have to prefer Azure DevOps over the other technologies? So you see that, right? So I have all the tasks, everything predefined. So which one is easier? If you take other tools, you really have to implement for yourself. It's a bit difficult thing, you know. So kindly unmute. Okay, yes, I can do that. I guess you guys can unmute yourself. You can go to unmute. Okay, let me just unmute. Nihal. Nihal. Are you be able to unmute yourself? Yes.
Hey, Lakshman, good morning.
Yeah, hi. Good morning. Yeah.
Can you? Yeah. Lakshman, this is very interesting. The first time I got to know about this Azure DevOps. And this is very much simplified thing. And this thing, Lakshman, when you deploy onto the dev infrastructure, or say test infrastructure, I mean, in our organization, we have got a couple of machines on which we are going to deploy. But what is the case here? I mean, this is quite interesting. I mean, do we have different machines in which we are going to mention about the machine's IP in the script, in the pipelines?
So no, I mean, you say that, as I mentioned, I have deployed a web app application. Okay, so you can have many kind of platforms that you deploy. For example, you basically build your own VM and then you want to deploy there. Then you really need to know that how you configure the integration between the VM. Or maybe you want to deploy into Kubernetes. Then how do you really integrate with the Kubernetes? You want to deploy somewhere else. So it is something that the target basically changes, but the way that you deploy that, you really design in the same way that how I have actually showed you in this presentation. Did you get my, can I speak? Yes. Are you not able to unmute yourself? Let me just do, I think you guys can do. Let me just, so there, can I speak? Yes. It is not allowed to speak. Okay. You should be able to. So AWS or Azure, which one is good? So you see that Microsoft is really having lots of customers. So in future, Microsoft is really focusing on this DevOps customers to really gather. I would say Microsoft, but up to you. I mean, that's something that what I can answer. Why I'm not able to make you unmute? So to master Azure DevOps, do I need to learn external tools? Please list out them. You see here, let me just here you can see that I also have, for example, in the Azure artifacts, in place of Azure artifacts, you have also other tools like this, Nexus, JFrog, Akiva, and anything. And in the place of, let's say, the CI/CD, yeah, the CI/CD or the Git repository. So you have something called, these tools. So it means not only the Azure repos or Azure DevOps, and other tools also basically can be replaced. So it means you can use any other tools in place of these, which I really have implemented in my pipelines. Let me see, guys, why I'm not able to unmute you guys. Why? Okay, so now you guys can do that. So you can unmute yourself. I, Lakshman, first deploy job goes
Hi.
to dev. Yes, hi.
Hi, this is Ganapati.
Yeah, Ganpati.
Yeah,
Yes.
my doubt is that, see, if you have this dev infrastructure, dev infrastructure, as you told, right? Ask somebody. Ask somebody to unmute.
Guys, can you unmute yourself if somebody is speaking?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Hello. Hello.
Sir.
Hi, guys.
Yes, Ashok. Ashok, it's very nice to explain about the DevOps process, the way the automation process described it very nicely. So, as a first time DevOps part, like to know.
Yeah, guys. Now the one who wants to speak, only that guy should, unmute. So
Yes,
can you?
Lakshman.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Lakshman, for detailing the process and the way the automation happening in the pipeline process and the CIC. I got to understand. As first time into the DevOps part, I would like to understand how I can develop a pipeline scripting practice and improvise on that. Any tool where we can practice instead of not doing it in the cloud or any repositories.
Why? I mean, this is for free, right? So you can use it for free. You can implement your task and everything for free. So you can directly implement in the repos itself, right? Why you want to practice on other third-party tools? So it is for free. You guys can use it, okay, for 1 year if you want to learn this Azure DevOps. So you can really practice for, if you want to practice for Azure Cloud, you can, that is for free for 1 month. So you can practice as much as you can, then you will be perfect in that. Yeah.
So during the build part, now as soon as the code is pushed into the repo, how this is happening immediately for the build process?
Because as I told you, I mean, it has a trigger. So you see that I have a trigger in which is placed here. So you see that the trigger, whenever there is a branch, there is somebody pushed into this particular branch which starts with dev, then that automatically gets pushed, gets triggered, and then it will build your a build process for your project.
And then
so yeah.
And for the approval also, will there be any steps to that automatically get notify the reviewer approver?
Yes. You see that, I mean, I also want to show you the deployment to the dev is basically done. But you see, for test and approval, for test and production, it is waiting for the approval process here. You see?
Yeah.
So it is waiting for. So maybe I can just. You see that it is basically waiting. So when I say review and resume, if I reject it, then the deployment will not take place. If I say review, resume, and then it will deploy. Okay. So now I will say resume, and then it will go and basically deploy it. And also, I would like to show you that I already deployed into dev, right? I said my banking application is deployed into dev. Now let me just go to Azure portal, and then I go to the Azure portal. So I don't know if you know or you don't know, but it does not matter. And this is the resource group where I deployed it, and I go into, this is the web app I deployed as an infrastructure as a code. Okay. So now I deployed my application, guys. So I copy this and I click on this, and my application is really up and running. You see, we can just wait. So my application is deployed, and now it's basically up and running in the dev environment. And the developers will access this application and check if something is really working or not, and so on. They basically ensure that everything is perfectly working fine.
Okay. Ashwin, but technically we need to, the scripting commands, we should aware of it, right? Like points.
There are very much minimal. You see, they're very much minimal. I mean, you should know the basic stuff that how you can handle in the task. Okay. But thereafter, everything you actually can handle with the task, as I mentioned. But if you have to handle a bit with the scripting, yes, you need to have the basic understanding of that. But you see my application. This is a banking application, which is really deployed, and then it is accessible. So this is a development environment. And let me see if the testing is also done. So this testing is also complete. Now I also can access the test environment, going into the test web app, and I also will access the test web app. And this web app application will be given access to the testers, and they will also be doing the testing. So when I click on that, and even in the testing also, the same application will be running, and the testers will connect to this application, and they will do they will basically do the testing and everything. Once this is done, thereafter we will approve it to the production. So see, so let's say that the testing is really working fine. I go here and I do review, and I basically say approve. Now the process, the deployment process is actually taking place. You see, once this is approved, then only it will be deploying into the production. Once it is deployed into the production, and all the customers will be accessing the production application.
Okay, thank you, Lakshman. So nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one more thing, guys. I mean, I really can't explain in detail each and every topic in this particular workshop. The main agenda for me to really understand the basic workflow of the CI/CD and show you the real, continuous integration and delivery, deployment, and infrastructure as a code. You see that the testing application is also running.
Yeah, already I missed the connection. My doubt is that actually you told that dev infrastructure that is we will get by ARM template. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. See, for example, if I take the Java application, see our infrastructure will be different. For example, Java version will be different. That kind of infrastructure where I can find, and how Azure will exactly give.
So see this. Yeah, understood your question. So it really depends on the infrastructure which you have. For example, as I already mentioned, if you have a Tomcat server where you have installed in your VM or in your local premises, then you will be deploying your application into your on-premises infrastructure. It means you have your own web server installed with Tomcat, and you will be installing it. Or else, if you want to install your application in the cloud services, then you will choose app service or maybe some other service. Or if you want to deploy your Java application in the containers, then you will choose containers. So it really is not one solution that I have to say. It all depends on the target that where you really want to run your application.
So you mean to say that if it is a containers, the process will change?
Yeah, slightly. See, the way the application development is still the same, but the way the deployment we do, a big changes. That's it.
But the infrastructure template we should not take. We should take Docker files, like that kind of process we have to go. Am I
See,
right?
no. The point is you write a Docker file for your application build. But when you want to deploy, let's say, container registry, how do you do that? You can do with the ARM template. You want to deploy your, Kubernetes cluster, and how can you do that? You can use ARM template. So you still can use the ARM templates in order to deploy your infrastructure. Docker file is meant for deploying your application into the Docker image. Okay, but thereafter the Docker image will be deployed as containers into the other platforms such as containers or maybe the Kubernetes and so on, right?
Yeah. So most of the people, we will actually in our project will push the code into the Git. So what would be the best approach, like Azure repos or Git repos, Git?
see, the point is, I that is the reason why I said you can use any repository. You want to use GitHub, or you want to use AWS code, you want to use Azure repo, it's up to you. But in our case, in our workshop today, we are focusing on Azure DevOps. That is the reason I basically talked about Azure repo. Okay, Azure DevOps contains everything what you need for the DevOps guy to implement CI/CD, and that is what our main focus is, to really implement and see that how it's really working. Yeah. Now you see that the deployment to the production.
What marks the difference between the testing, dev environment, and production environment? Is it the bunch of people working? Because if you consider the target group, like for example, if you are deploying onto the Tomcat server, everything will be deployed onto the Tomcat server. We might be having a different Tomcat server for each environment. Is the major difference, or it is the bunch of people? Like for in dev environment, they will be looking for the unit testing, and here in testing environment, they will be checking the application functionalities and all.
Yes, absolutely. So you see, I mean, when I say, let me just, maybe I can just. So when I say this development is only meant for the developers to access and test. They test whatever they really want to test. But in the testing environment, they might need to test a few more things apart from the developers what they actually tested. So it means even they want to test, they want to do a load test, for example, they want to put a lot of load on the application and see whether this application is really good. They really want to do a kind of, let's say, other test with a different kind of combinations. So they also want to test, with a different kind of tools, and which will really, test the application performance, application routing, and everything. So it's really a lot of things will really change when it comes to the infrastructure. And in the production, let's say there are lakhs of users are actually connecting to the production banking application. So it means the infrastructure should be pretty much bigger than what you have in the test and dev, right? So there are lots of things to consider. It is basically lots of things involved, and lots of things basically differentiated from each other. So it is not same as what you have in the dev and what is also there in the production. So that's something completely different, and also based on our testing, that how we want to go.
A couple of questions, sir.
Yeah.
The resources demonstrated that there is a manual sort of a permission required in order to deploy the application to production. For example, if I am raising a PR request in order to merging it to the production code, so then we can also create that sort of an manual intervention in order to merge the PR from one feature branch to production branch or something like that. Release branch.
The point is, you really don't merge directly the feature branch into the production branch, for example. Okay, so you go through a process, but there are some scenarios where you really have to fix couple of bugs that you want to fix, then there are basically some kind of branching strategies through which you follow and fix your issue, and then deploy that into the, again, testing environment and go with the production. So no kind of DevOps guy or no other application deployment guy will directly deploy into the production, directly fixing or maybe writing the code. Okay, though you raise a pull request, you don't raise the pull request to the production branch. Instead of that, you will raise a pull request to the development branch, and then that will be basically again sent back to the master branch or stable branch, and from there you deploy it. It all depends, the branching strategy that you have chosen for your project. It all really depends. There are lots of things are interlinked. So it's basically there are a lot of process that we really have to follow. But still, yes, if you want to deploy into the production, for sure, there should be an approval process before you deploy.
Okay. So another thing is, like, mostly when we talk about when we are thinking about DevOps engineers,
your voice is getting low.
Can you hear me right now?
Yes.
Is it okay?
Yes.
So mostly when we are thinking about the Azure DevOps engineer role, we are talking mostly about like locate the pipelines, build and release pipelines, sort of thing. But as we know, like from DevOps point of view, we need to know other side as well. For example, as you know that there are two portals, like portal.azure and dev.azure. For example, if I want to deploy my application to, for example, in an app server, so that part I also know how to create a service connection or how to use a sort of
See, this workshop only focuses on the CI/CD, but there are topics in the training that we basically go through each and every topic. As I said, I cannot really explain every topic in 2 or 3 years of time. So it is a 45 days to 2 months of course. So I would like to compress and then present it to you guys what exactly it is. But each and everything what is really needed, we will be covering all those stuff.
So from your experience and your exposure to this cloud platform, what are the top, you can say, 5 other services that the DevOps engineer must know?
See, the main thing, you should be knowing the app services, and you should be knowing the VMs creations, and also the network creations and so on. You should also be knowing Dockers, how you can run, and also Kubernetes in the cloud platforms. You also should be knowing function apps and so on. So you can list it.
Okay. So these are the like the major prime areas that has to be in the
right.
Okay. Thank you.
My last doubt, like as my friend asked, like before now, as a Java developer, what are the important services?
So as I told you, that's something what I told you, right? So it depends how you want to deploy your application, where you want to deploy your application. Nowadays, everybody is driving towards the cloud because you do not need to install the web servers that you need. You do not need to manage the platform in your on-premises. So everybody is driving towards the cloud services such as web apps or app services or this stuff, and they're deploying their application. So that's something
that's what I'm telling. We are using cloud only as the cloud till the binary file, as you told, till the binary file is created. That is build project. To that level, our interaction will be enough.
Yes. Yeah. See, the point is
our interaction.
I don't know. Your voice is breaking, but let me explain you. I understand. So the basic point, when you really build the binary, okay, and your DevOps engineer or somebody, they will be deploying your binary into the infrastructure or maybe into the app service or whatever the platform is. And then let's say the testers have started testing their application. When they have started testing their application, something is wrong. They found some issue. Then what they do, they actually come back to the developers, and again they will talk to you. They will talk to the developers in order to fix that issue, right? So it means, it does not mean once you generate the binary, your role is done. You also have to talk to the testers sometimes. You also have to talk to the DevOps engineers sometimes. You also have to talk to the other teams sometimes. It really, you should be really collaborating with all the teams till it basically goes into the production. Sometimes there is an issue in the production, then who knows what is really happening with the application? Developers know. So they come to the meeting or the collaboration with the operations team, and they also have to be in the meeting, and they have to speak something with respect to the application also. Shiv Prasad.
Shall I customize my dev infrastructure like with my as the system configurations like softwares?
You can do that. If you can do that, if you want to customize the environment for yourself, you build your own environment by creating VMs and then install your web server and then configure the way that you like.
So the only thing is that we need to take one ARM template, then we can customize it. That is the process.
When you want to deploy into the app service, yes. When you want to deploy into the app service, if you want to customize something in the app service, then yes, you have to do something in the ARM template. Not everything you can customize, okay? But there are settings given by the Azure, and those things can be customized by you.
Okay. But for integration purpose, whatever you have written the code, that code developer need to write in the pipeline. That is sure.
Yes.
Okay. Sure. Thank you very much, and no it's problem. A very nice session.
Yeah. Okay, and Shiva Prasad, Python is required for DevOps. Bash scripting is fine. Python. See, it's all fine. I mean, if you know one scripting and you really can handle it, so not necessarily you should be knowing everything. Okay, so don't worry about it. Yes, scripting is mandatory for every DevOps engineer. If you know scripting, your life will be easier being a DevOps engineer. Okay.
Yeah, Lakshman, one thing, what we found with your class is that with the Azure DevOps, starting from code commit till deploying onto the servers, everything has been taken care. I mean, where exactly the other DevOps tools, like if you say the Ansible, the Dockers, the Kubernetes comes into play, are they really being integrated, or else it's not required?
See, Azure DevOps is pretty much integrated with all the other tools that what you really need. So it means, let's say that you really want to use some Terraform. Okay, so I used ARM templates, my infrastructure deployment. You can use Terraform instead of ARM templates. That you can also integrate that. You want to use some Ansible, you can also integrate that Ansible. You want to use something called container registry. So it is a container registry service. So that's also pretty much integrated. Kubernetes, that is also pretty much integrated. And everything, I mean, Azure DevOps is pretty much comfortable to be integrated with all the other tools out there in the market.
Yeah, I seen many times the Linux commands are using in the DevOps, but in the last project I worked, I never used the one Linux command. I used GUI only. So if I go to interview, they may ask you Linux comments. They are really mandatory.
So that's what I said. I mean, it really depends on the person to person, if you ask me. So for example, in my opinion, when I did the interviews for the candidates, I really don't care if they really know scripting or not, but I asked them, are they really interested in learning the scripting? Okay, because anybody can learn the script, and anybody can learn on whatever is really needed for the project. That is what I really expect from the candidate. But others would really ask some, they really go into the topics and they really ask, but it really depends on the candidate to candidate who is really doing an interview. Okay, so I cannot really answer that question because it really depends on the person who is doing an interview.
So the interview for the interviewer, I can say that I have achieved my work and deployment through the GUI. I didn't get a chance through the Linux. Can I say that?
Why not? Why not? See, why not? I mean, see, if you get the opportunity, you start working it, right? If you don't get the opportunity, then you did not work. That's okay.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Any other questions, guys? I don't know how you guys felt the demo. I mean, the workshop. So as I said, I mean, I really can't explain everything in one workshop, the whole Azure DevOps, but try to give you the basic understanding that what we really doing it.
One question I want, sir. Sir, you are providing AWS and Azure both.
Who's providing? I don't get it. So I handle Azure DevOps batches in the Ashok IT.
And how much time it takes to do this?
It takes 45 days to 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yes. Hi.
Yeah, this is Ashok, sir.
Yes. Hi, Ashok.
Sir, I have whenever going to deploy one either developer or developer. Once one person deployed in E2E. After that, I stopped my deployment. Okay. Another person going to process in perf and before going to deploy in E2E. Okay. Another person's going to start the deployment in dev. But what is the process internally happen?
So see, as I basically mentioned, I mean, if you can see the proper workflow that I deployed, I mean, initially that should basically go into the dev. Nobody can come and then they basically directly deploy into the test and pre-production or the E2E environment, right? So they have to go through the step by step so that they actually can test their application properly. They really can't go and deploy into the directly production or somewhere, right?
Yes. Sorry, I'm not asking to one step by step. Suppose my code is there in ET, right? I stopped. Okay, some person going to deploy to prod. Since that time, what happened? I mean, other person also it is going to prod or what is happened? But another question.
No, I don't really get it. So your code is there in E2E, okay? E2E. So you mean the testing environment, right?
E2E mean suppose the
end-to-end testing environment that you are saying.
Yes, sir. Yeah. First,
so when that is in the testing environment, how come other will go and deploy in the production? How can they do that? They should not do it, right? So when your code is
suppose before dev is there and E2E is there and prod is there. I stopped. I deployed my code in E2E. After that, I have to test manually. After once E2E testing done manually, then I have to deploy prod. Right? I stop in E2E, but other person going to deploy to prod on other code.
Why?
Other story. Other
No. That cannot happen. So that cannot happen. So why other guy will go into the production? So if if you basically, if your story, you are working on some future, okay, and your future is actually being tested in the test. For example, if your future is not really ready to the production or is not really needed for the production, then if others are actually asking for other features to be deployed, then that has to be tested thoroughly into the E2E and thereafter production. Why other guy will actually directly go into the production? They don't do it like that. We don't allow. I mean, being a DevOps engineer, we don't allow that. I never did so.
Yeah, I'm working real time also, but I don't know internally what happened. I developed the code and I deployed the prod. But initially, I deployed in E2E and everything I find my side, then I have to deploy it in prod. But other person's code also going to prod. That time, one guy told, my test is not properly working, how it is deployed in prod. Like
that's what I was saying, right? That's what I was saying. So it should not be the process that how they have to go. If the people don't know how they have to go and they do all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, any restriction we have to give or like, I mean.
Yeah, there is really a restriction. So you see that, I mean, why do I have the approvals in between? Why do you have the approval? The one, let's say the product owner should approve it, right? The product owner knows somebody is directly deploying into the production. He will reject it. The deployment will not take place, right? Because he's a guy who is responsible that what is actually going into the production or not.
Okay. Our entire code we have to write, all the script we have to write in YAML file or
so when it comes to pipelines in the Azure DevOps, yes, you write in the YAML pipelines. That's quite simpler, as I showed you, right?
Only YAML file only, mean any instructions.
Yeah. In terms of tasks that you write.
Okay. Thank you, Lakshmi.
Yeah.
Sir, for Java developer, how much this cloud thing requires? Is AWS or Azure?
For Java developer, for Java developer or DevOps engineer?
Java developers, backend developers. It is
See, the basic thing, I mean, you should know the Java development, of course, you are a developer, and you should know the basic services such as app services, how they work, and these stuff, containers, Kubernates. That's it. I mean, being a developer, you do not need to know everything. Yes. Yes. You do not need to know much, Safian. You should know the basic app services, how they work, and how you access and this stuff, how the containers work, how the Kubernetes work, and so on.
So for AWS or Azure, this designation will be different.
Designation would be what? I mean, the names for the services?
Like I am working for backend developer. I am a software developer. Now, software developer. Suppose I will involve in this field, cloud things. Then what will be the position?
See, the point is, if you are a developer, you also want to do a DevOps engineer, and you basically call it as a developer come DevOps engineer. So as I said, DevOps engineer does not mean that he's not a developer. He's also a developer. Okay. So designation does not matter here. That's what I said. So some developers also do the development, some developers, they also do the development. So some developers, they also do the DevOps engineer task. So they are not separate. Okay.
So I can get sometime they can told me to also to work on cloud.
Yeah. Why not? Yeah, I mean, why not? So if you are interested and you still can go and work as a DevOps engineer and also the cloud. So
okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for this presentation. From what I've seen so far, you have not used things like Docker containerizations to push the images to the Azure cloud. Is that necessary for this process, or Azure DevOps has built in everything? So you don't have to leverage all those third parties to.
It is, see, in this particular Azure DevOps course, we also have, we also talk about the Docker containers. We also talk about Kubernetes, and also Azure DevOps is pretty much integrated with this containers and, Kubernetes and so on. So this everything, I mean, you really can implement even the containerization also with the Azure DevOps. We will also.
So when is the batch starting?
We are going to start in the next week. We will inform in the group charts. So did you guys join in the group? So I don't know if you guys have joined in the group.
Yeah, we are in the WhatsApp group.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, sir.
Hi.
Sir, till we get the confirmation from the testing team to deploy.
Yes.
Then what will be the work that other teams will be doing, unless they get the approval?
See, once you deploy into the test environment, then the testing team will be basically testing your application thoroughly. Once that is done, then only that will be basically sent to the next environment what we have. So till then, the developers will be working on the existing other features that they have to add into the application. So this is a continuous iterative process which continuously happening. That is the reason why it is a continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous deployment.
Hi Lakshman, may I know what is the difference between like Azure CI/CD and AWS Azure CD?
See, as I said, I mean, this is a concept of implementing or designing and implementing the CI/CD. So if you know this, you can implement either in AWS, in Azure DevOps, or maybe in the Jenkins. So the designing is important as far as this DevOps is concerned. Okay, so our main focus is really to give you that how the CI/CD looks like, but the same flow you can also, same design you can also implement in the AWS. Okay, there is no any difference. Only the tools change. That's it.
Okay. The configurations or anything change required to do that, like
yeah, I mean, of course there are few things with respect to AWS that you have to do it, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like in the AWS, we are using to store all the things like Docker by using run the Docker and Kubernetes, right? Here, what are the things we can run with it? Like in the same version, the Docker and Kubernetes only, or we can go some other modules like
everything what you want to do it in terms of the CI/CD implementation. You can do everything, not only Docker, Kubernetes. Okay. Everything you can do it.
Other than that, what are the things? Is there any?
So you, let's say I told you you want to integrate your Artifactory such as Nexus, JFrog. You want to integrate your Azure DevOps with the Sonar Cube. You can integrate. You want to integrate with the Black Duck scan. Black Duck is a tool which will do the validation of your licenses. You can also integrate with that. So you want to integrate, something called, let's say, Datadog. You can also integrate that. There are many out there, So that's what I said. So there are many things that you actually can integrate with the Azure DevOps.
Yeah, compared with in the DevOps, like we have GCP, GCP, Azure, and AWS. Right? In that, which is the best one for our current situation for the demand for that? Like,
see, the only thing I can say, Microsoft really has got lots of customers, and they are focusing more on gathering the customers now. Microsoft is pretty much in the market, and for sure they will be getting lots of customers in coming days. So I hope this would be the best option to choose, but up to you later.
Yeah, why? Because the demand perspective and expenditure perspective also, GCP is currently more expensive. After that, having like Azure DevOps, I believe that. I'm not sure about that. That one only you need to give the clarification.
No. I don't think
the
so
AWS. But the demand is having like these two is the major. But sorry, like a cost perspective, DevOps like AWS, they are having less price for the cost perspective also. That's why I'm saying that is the correct one only, or else, I said
no. See, it really depends, So let me tell you one logic. So every one of us are actually using Windows, right?
Yes,
Windows and other Microsoft products. So let's say if Microsoft comes and say, okay, you are using my product, this Windows product. If you use, I will give you a discount offer for the Azure DevOps since you are using my product. Okay. And who will be getting the discount? So they will be getting, right? We will be getting more discount because Microsoft, everybody is using the Microsoft product. Is it so? So then if they offer the discount and why customers can't take it? I've seen many guys are migrating to the Microsoft. If you see, there are lots of projects in outside that they are basically doing a migration to the Azure. Don't you see them?
Yeah, I got it. That's why I'm saying like if you can go with this, like in the cost perspective, they can okay, but in the performance perspective, which is the best one, like GCP or
of course, both. I mean, why not? I mean, why not Microsoft? Microsoft is also doing good in terms of performance, right?
Yeah.
There are some glitches happens with every cloud, including the Microsoft. I don't say there's no problem at all. Every cloud provider has some issues here and there. Okay, so you cannot really compare like so. Okay.
Yeah. Could you please suggest me like for as a Java developer with a backend developer, which is the best one for cloud end to go with that? Like
you are a Java developer, right?
Yeah, I'm also Java developer, and I have already some experience on cloud like CloudWatch, Dynatrace, and Splunk and Dynatrace. Okay, in this also some of the things like I have good experience like storing with the S3, but I want to improve myself in AWS or something. Like I want to know that. That's why. Could you please
so yeah, I mean, see, as I showed you, I mean the main thing that what I presented today, if you really want to do any kind of stuff in Azure DevOps, and you see all the tasks what we have used, they are already predefined. It is very easy to get it from the Microsoft documentation and implement for your needs. So instead of really learning the new syntax and then writing them, kind of difficult task for any newcomer. But this you really can use the existing predefined task that will make your life easier. So I recommend of really taking this approach because it would be easier for you to really start faster. And also, if you learn this task and wherever you go, in which project you go, if they are using Azure DevOps, they have to really use the same task. Then nothing changes,
Okay, just they can change with the.
They can change only the way that they design it.
Yeah, scripting language like as per requirement, Azure can maintain their own methodology, and GCP and AWS having their own methodology, but process is same.
Yes.
And yeah, yes, thank you.
Yeah. All right, guys. I think
one thing like if I can join with the AWS with Ashok, or if I can join with you like DevOps Azure. You see in the Docker and Kubernetes we are doing with the manually work, and we can run some scripts for in the running the application backend by using the CI/CD, right?
Yes.
So compare with this like for to learn with CI/CD application and all those things, is there anything required for self-scripting or JavaScripting to write these codes for the automation?
No, that's what I said. So there's nothing. I mean,
not required anything, right? Because many people like one of my friends he suggested me like if you want to learn these things, before going to CI/CD, you should need to learn any scripting language. That is so helpful for you.
I will
also.
tell you, Chandra. So one thing, I mean, if you know scripting, it will help you to make your life easier. Okay. Yeah. That will give you benefit. I mean, if you are a developer, and I don't really think it's a difficult task to you really to understand the script.
Yeah, why? Because actually, because I am trying to learn with the training from my organization with JavaScript, Node.js, MongoDB, and ChatGPT. They are going to provide.
Yeah. So now that's basically one of the hints that I would like to give. So if I want to really write down a script, why should I put my efforts? I simply assign it to the ChatGPT and it will give me the script, and then I will modify and then I can use it. So you need to be pretty much smarter when you are really working. Okay. So that's something that what you can also do it,
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
No problem.
And is there any session going on for this new batch or something? This is the only.
Yes, I think we are going to announce a new batch in the next week. So are you guys there in the group chat that we have basically given in the beginning?
Actually, I'm not sure. Today I have joined the first.
Timing, what will be there?
Yeah.
Timings could be maybe in the evening, 9 o'clock, or in the morning at 8 o'clock. Not yet decided, but we'll inform you very soon.
If evening 9 p.m. sir.
Yeah.
If it will be there, I can join, sir. Because morning I could not attend. Evening.
Are you maintaining only one batch or multiple batches in that day? Because
for now, I mean, I have a batch at 8 o'clock, which is already running. But
8 a.m.
now,
right?
I mean, 8 p.m. I'm sorry, 8 p.m. in the evening. But the problem is, I also have other projects in my hand, so I really can't spend a lot of time. I'll be maybe starting a batch at 9 p.m. So that's something that what I'm going to plan.
Why I'm asking, like, if we will go with the morning batch, that is grasping, like a gracious time also, it is healthy, right? Like, as per your convenience.
No. But for others, like, I don't know if
like 7 or 8, 7 a.m. or something, that is so helpful. Some other people we were having like working people, because in the week, evening time, as per you were having like you are in the meeting or you are in the call. After that, you have any meeting, suddenly they have intimated, or you have any issue, you need to disconnect the call and session, and then you can join it, right?
No, the point is, if it is 7 o'clock, for me, it is around 3:30 for me, in my time. So 3:30 in the morning.
You are living from?
I'm basically from Germany.
Germany. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
And sir, for this 9 p.m. batch, so how much time it will go the classes?
So the way that we are planning, I mean, what I do, I basically take regular classes, and also on Saturday, Sunday, I take special classes for the topics such as Terraform and Azure, and also kind of the ARM templates and Docker, Kubernetes. I will be covering on weekends. So I mean, I will be not taking any kind of gaps in between. So on Saturdays, Sundays, we will be discussing other topics which we need to. So that's something that how our batch will go.
Okay, and how suppose I have in office, I need to for me it is a work from office is there, so I'm not getting much time to revise. So when you explain, suppose in 9 p.m. batch, miss any like how much time I have to go through in that portion?
The same thing. I mean, the hour. For example, if I take 1 hour class, and if you just miss it, and you have to go through the same 1 hour class of what I really did it. So that's something that what you have to spend. That's it.
1 hour, miss.
Yeah.
And there is no any like in Java we have to learn language. These things are not there in cloud.
No. If you are a developer, that will really fetch you becoming a DevOps engineer, because you know the build process and so on. So that would really make your life easier, and then you will understand the whole thing, that how it happens. after the development.
Okay. Okay, sir. When you will announce, sir, just miss, I will.
Yeah.
I will. And cost, how much will be there, sir? Course.
For now, I mean, we have not really discussed about cost, Safian. So we only wanted to make this workshop, helpful for the audience. But we will basically give you the timing, date and timings, and also we will give you those details. And we will also conduct a few more demo classes for the new batch. So no worries, and we will give all the details in that.
Thank you, sir.
No problem. But how much, I don't know how many of you really able to follow, because I feel if you are really a newcomer, and it might difficult for you to really follow each and everything. But I try to just give as much as possible from my side. But yeah.
This means the process you follow, I got to understood, but I need to know everything. Means what all.
Yeah. Okay. But one thing, I mean, the one who really wants to join, as I said, I mean, we have a 8 p.m. batch, which we have just started last week. So you guys can continue, because we are only discussing the Git topics. If you guys already know the Git topics, I think you can go through the previous videos of mine for that batch, and you can join there. But otherwise, you can just wait till next batch. All right, guys, I think I hope this is helpful for you, and see you later, and have a nice weekend. Enjoy. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Thank you, sir.